The first guy had been standing by the drink coolers long enough that I started noticing little things about him that I shouldn't have had time to notice, like how one of his sleeves looked damp around the cuff, and how he kept opening the same cooler door without taking anything out. Snow was coming down so thick outside that the gas pump lights looked blurry, like someone had smeared them with a thumb, and every time a car went past on the highway the sound came late, muted by all that snow. I was alone behind the counter, halfway through counting cigarette cartons, and I kept doing that thing where you pretend not to watch somebody because you don't want to seem weird. Then the door chimed again. Another man came in, and he didn't brush the snow off his shoulders or stamp his boots or look at the coffee station or anything people usually do when they come in from the cold. He just stepped inside, let the door shut behind him, and stayed near it. I remember thinking, okay, maybe they're together. But they didn't look at each other. And the part I still can't shake is how normal I tried to make that feel in my head. I was 20, and I was only working that shift because I needed money fast. That's the least dramatic part of this whole thing. But it's the truth. I was saving for my driving test, and then after that I was hoping to get something cheap enough to stop asking my aunt for rides everywhere. My permit was already in my wallet, all bent at the corners from me taking it out and checking the date on it like that was going to make the road test happen sooner. Overnight paid a little more. Not enough to be worth it, honestly, but enough that I kept saying yes when the manager asked if I could cover. The store was one of those small highway places that somehow always smelled like old coffee, windshield washer fluid, and burnt hot dogs even when the rollers were empty. It sat off a stretch of road that got plenty of traffic in summer, but in winter, especially when it was snowing hard, you could go 10 minutes without seeing headlights. There were big windows across the front, which sounds safer than it is. Being visible isn't the same as being helped. At night it just means you feel like you're on display. I hated being there alone more than I ever admitted. People hear convenience store and think boring, but boring at 2 in the afternoon is different from boring just after midnight with snow piling up against the curb and the back stockroom darker than it should be. Because one of the fluorescent tubes had been half dead since November, I used to keep the little radio on low behind the counter, not because I liked what it played, but because silence made every sound too sharp. The ice machine kicking on, the freezer fans, the metal pop when the heater started moving air again. That night I'd worn my old green rain jacket over my hoodie because I didn't have a proper winter coat with a hood that stayed up. The zipper pull had broken off months before, so I had a paper clip looped through it. I remember that because later when I ran, that paper clip kept slapping against my chest. The first man was maybe in his 30s, maybe older, hard to tell. He had on a dark knit cap and one of those thin jackets that look warm until you're actually outside in them. He'd come in a few minutes earlier and gone straight to the coolers. I figured he was just killing time or warming up before getting back in his car. People did that. Truckers did it all the time. Drivers who didn't want to fall asleep did it. They'd wander, buy sunflower seeds, ask if the coffee was fresh when they were already pouring it. The second man was bigger, not huge, just broader. He stayed near the door with his hands in his pockets and looked out the windows more than he looked inside the store. If somebody asked me what was weird first, it was that. The way he seemed more interested in who might pull in than in anything around him. Still, I told myself they were probably together. I told myself one was waiting for the other to pick something. I told myself the one by the door was cold. The first man finally turned and walked toward the counter carrying nothing. He gave me this small, polite smile like he was about to ask for something normal. And for a second I almost felt embarrassed for being so keyed up. He said, "You know if the next town over still has that 24-hour gas station?" I said I thought so, but I wasn't positive. He nodded like that mattered a lot. Then he asked if the road out back looped around to the highway or dead-ended at the plow shed. Then he asked how much the phone chargers cost, but he didn't look at the chargers when he asked. He looked at me. Not hard, not glaring. Just enough that I had to keep answering. Behind him, the other man hadn't moved. That's when I started doing something I still do when I'm uncomfortable, which is over-explaining. I pointed too much. I talked too much. I said the chargers were on the end cap by the medicine aisle, and the back road usually got plowed later than the highway. And if he was trying to head east, he'd probably be better off staying on the main route. I could hear myself sounding fake cheerful, like I was trying to prove to the room that everything was fine. He kept me there with tiny questions. Which chargers for an iPhone? Do you sell gloves? Is the bathroom key still broken? All stuff that made sense separately. Together it felt like someone tossing pebbles at a window just to keep hearing the noise. I glanced past him and saw the second man looking toward the hall that led to the employee bathroom and stockroom. I said, "Can I help you find something?" He didn't answer me. The first man did. "He's good," he said. That landed wrong immediately. Not because of the words, but because of how quick it was, like he'd been waiting for me to ask. I should probably explain the layout, because it matters. The counter ran in an L shape, with the register at the center and a low swinging gate at one end so employees could get in and out. Behind the counter there was the cigarette wall, the lottery cabinet, and a narrow path back to the little office and stockroom. The silent alarm button was mounted under the shelf below the register. I knew exactly where it was. We all did. The manager had shown it to me twice, once during training and once after a guy came in drunk and started yelling about pump receipts. He'd tapped the shelf and said, "Only use it if something feels off before it becomes obvious." At the time, I thought that was kind of useless advice. What counts as off? How off? How obvious is obvious enough? The first man picked up a pack of gum from the display and set it down. "Price on this?" I scanned it. My hands were already a little clumsy, and I remember being annoyed at that. It was gum. There was no reason my fingers should be fumbling gum. "2 something," I said. He didn't reach for his wallet. He said, "You got any of those little plastic bags?" "Yeah, for ice. We can do a bag of ice." "No, I mean just a bag." I bent down automatically to get one from the rack under the counter. And when I did, I saw boots. Not the first man's, behind the counter, inside the staff space. For a second, my brain didn't process it as danger. It processed it as a mistake. Like maybe some customer had gotten turned around and gone through the gate without thinking. That's how badly your mind wants things to stay normal. I stood back up too fast and hit my shoulder on the shelf. The second man was 3 steps behind the counter, silent as a shadow, one hand hovering near the storage door handle, not touching it yet. Hovering. I looked at him, then at the first man. The first man had stopped pretending to shop, stopped pretending to ask questions, stopped even looking around. His face had changed in this really small way. Not angry, not excited, just settled, like the part he was playing was over. I don't know how to explain what that did to me except that my body understood it before my mind did. My mouth went dry so fast I had to swallow twice before any sound came out. My fingers were numb. I could feel my heartbeat in my gums, which I didn't know was possible until then. I said, "You can't be back here." My voice came out thinner than I wanted. The second man looked at the storage door, then back at me. His eyes flicked once to the office hall. He was measuring something. Distance, maybe. Time, whether he had enough of both. The first man didn't say a word. The store suddenly felt way too open and way too small at the same time. Front windows on one side, blank shelves on the other, nobody at the pumps, highway beyond that, snow still falling so hard it swallowed everything more than a little distance away. I was standing in a fully lit box where anybody passing by could have looked in and still not understood a thing. I slid my hand under the counter shelf, very slow. I thought if I moved too fast, they'd move too. The first man saw me look down. He took 1 step closer to the counter. And something in me just snapped from trying to be polite into knowing I had maybe 1 second left to choose. I hit the silent alarm with the side of my hand and ran. I didn't go through the gate. I didn't think I could get around it fast enough. I shoved the little half door so hard it banged off the stopper, caught my hip on the edge, and stumbled into the chip rack. Bags exploded onto the floor. I heard the first man say, "Hey," not loud, almost annoyed, like I'd interrupted something. Then I heard shoes scuff hard on the tile behind me. I bolted for the front door. The cold hit me so hard it felt clean, just a slap of air and snow and my lungs locking up. I hadn't grabbed my coat, hadn't grabbed my phone, nothing. I remember the paper clip on my zipper smacking my chin as I ran. I slipped off the curb, caught myself on one hand in the slush and scrambled toward the nearest pump island because I didn't know where else to go. And right then, like something timed too perfectly to feel real, a semi-truck turned in. Big white cab, yellow clearance lights, slow and loud and beautiful. The driver must have seen me waving because he leaned on the horn. One long blast that rolled across the lot. His headlights washed the whole front of the store. I looked back and both men were in the doorway. They had made it that far. Then they stopped. The bigger one turned first. The other one looked at me one last time, not angry, not panicked, just calculating again. And then they both moved fast along the side of the building toward the back, out of the light. The truck driver pulled up crooked near the entrance and threw open his door before the truck had fully settled. He was this older guy in a heavy brown coat and insulated gloves, and I don't think I'll ever forget the look on his face when he saw I was outside without a coat in active snowfall. He didn't ask a bunch of questions at first. He just said, "Get in the cab or get inside, now." I told him I couldn't go back in. He looked toward the side of the building, then at me. and whatever he saw in my face was enough. He got me into his truck, blasted the heat, and called 911 while I kept turning around in the seat to look at the store. I kept expecting to see one of them come back into view. The police got there faster than I would have guessed, probably because the roads were so empty that night. 2 deputies. They checked around the building first, then inside. One of them brought me my jacket and asked if anything was missing. I remember almost laughing at that, not because it was funny, but because it felt insane that we were still talking like this might have been shoplifting. Nothing was missing, at least nothing obvious. The back storage door was still closed. The office hadn't been touched. The second man hadn't gotten farther than the start of the staff area, which is the part I think about most. He wasn't rummaging, he wasn't grabbing cigarettes or cash, he was moving inward. One of the deputies asked if maybe they were trying to distract me so one of them could steal from behind the counter. Maybe. That was the official shape everyone kept trying to press it into. It was the only version that made the paperwork neat. 2 men. Busy, the cashier. Slip behind the counter. Get what they can, leave. But that isn't how it felt in the room. If you want money, you show a weapon or demand the register or at least act like the register matters. These 2 acted like the register was beside the point. The questions, the door, the way the second guy looked toward the back room, the way the first one stopped talking the exact second the other got where he wanted to be. It felt coordinated in a way that still makes my skin go tight when I think about it too long. The manager came in around dawn looking half asleep and half furious in the way managers do when they're scared but trying not to show it. He made coffee, watched the grainy camera footage a dozen times and kept pausing on the moment where I ducked for the bag and then shot upright. The cameras had no sound. You could see the second man move past the gate line, but from that angle it almost looked small. Harmless, if you didn't know what the air felt like in there. I didn't finish the shift, obviously. My aunt came and got me after daylight. The roads were still ugly, dirty piles of snow pushed up against the shoulders, gray sky that never fully brightened. She kept saying I did the right thing, and I knew that, but it took a while for my body to catch up. Even in the car with the heater on, I couldn't unclench my jaw. I went back to work a week later because I needed the money. That's another ugly, ordinary truth. Fear doesn't cancel rent or test fees. I did switch off overnights not long after that. I told them it was because of school and transportation, which was easier than saying I couldn't stand that door chime anymore. Every time it rang after midnight, I'd feel the muscles in my shoulders tighten before I even looked up. I did eventually take the driving test. I passed on the second try because I clipped the curb the first time doing parallel parking. Even that memory is tied to the store now, because all through the test I kept checking my mirrors like something might be stepping into view behind me. People still ask if I think they were trying to rob the place. Maybe. I just don't know why one of them needed to get all the way behind the counter and toward the storage door while the other one kept me talking. Or why they left the second actual witness pulled into the lot. And if that truck hadn't turned in right when it did, I still don't know what exactly they were planning to do once both of them were behind the counter with me. Story 2. The next one happened to somebody a lot more used to being alone than I was, and I think that's part of why it bothers me. The first thing I noticed was the light in the west corridor flickering on the monitor. 2 quick dips like someone had blinked in front of the camera. Not full power loss. Not a dead feed. Just enough to catch the eye if you spend years looking at a wall of screens. I had my thermos open, tea still hot enough to steam the plastic lid, and I remember setting it down because I wanted both hands free for the keyboard. A winter storm had rolled in around sunset and kept getting worse. By midnight, the city had gone oddly hollow. The streets below the lobby windows were mostly empty, and the only moving light came from plows pushing slow orange flashes along the far avenue. Inside the building, everything sounded sharper than usual because there were no late workers, no cleaning crew, no elevators running beyond the automatic cycles. Just FAC, distant pipe noise, and me in the security office with my log sheet and my tea. The hallway light on camera blinked again. Then the door at the end of that corridor, the records room on the 7th floor, showed as slightly open. I had locked that floor myself an hour earlier. I should say I don't scare easily in empty buildings. That's not bravado. It's repetition. Once you've done enough night shifts in offices, you stop reacting to the normal noises. Expansion creaks, elevator settling, air pressure pulling on a door when another one closes somewhere else. People who don't work that environment hear a thump and think intruder. I hear a thump and think ductwork, old frame, cleaning cart left with a loose wheel. 90% of the job is knowing what not to overreact to. I'd been doing security in one form or another for a long time by then. Long enough that I could tell which stairwell door needed an extra pull in humid weather and which camera lagged half a second when the network was busy. I was in my 40s. Married. Boring in the most useful way. My wife used to joke that I prepared for night shift like I was going fishing. Same boots by the door, same flashlight, same thermos of homemade tea. Ginger and lemon when it was cold. Mint if I'd had a headache that day. That night it was black tea with too much honey, because I'd started feeling the storm in my sinuses before I even left the house. The building was 12 floors, mostly law offices and financial firms, with one empty suite under renovation on the 9th. After hours, especially in bad weather, it became a completely different place. During the day it was badge swipes, delivery people, phones ringing, the front revolving door going in steady circles. At night it was all clean lines and reflective surfaces and motion sensors waiting for something to justify their existence. My routine was simple. Check cameras, do a physical round every hour, note anything unusual, make sure no exterior access points were compromised. The kind of work where nothing happening is good news. When I saw that door on the 7th floor sitting a few inches open, I assumed the storm was messing with pressure in the corridor, or that I'd failed to pull it fully shut on my round. Annoying, but explainable. I took the service elevator up. The cab smelled faintly like wet wool because somebody had tracked snow in before the building closed. When the doors opened on 7, the corridor was quiet enough that I could hear the ballast hum in the ceiling fixtures. The light that had flickered on camera was steady in person. Bright even, no visible issue. And the records room door was open, not wide, just off the latch. I walked over, checked the frame, checked the handle, checked the strike plate. Nothing broken, no marks. The room inside was dark and still, rows of shelving and banker boxes exactly as it should be. I swept it with the flashlight anyway. Empty. I closed the door firmly until I heard the latch catch. Then I tested it. solid. Back in the elevator, I wrote a note in my log that the corridor light would need maintenance review if it continued to flicker. That's how my brain was handling it at that point. Administrative nuisance. Something for the morning crew. I got back to the security office, poured tea into the lid, and sat down. 3 minutes later, the door on the 7th floor was open again on camera. No one on the feed, no visible movement between closed and open. One frame with it shut, another with it off the latch. I didn't like that, but there was still a path to a normal answer. Some doors sit badly in winter. Metal contracts, a warped frame can catch, then slip. The storm had the whole building under pressure. I told myself that, because I have always believed the fastest way to make a bad decision in security is to romanticize a mechanical problem into a threat. Still, I called building management to flag it. The line redirected straight to a recorded weather closure message. Office closed due to storm conditions. For emergencies, contact emergency services. I hung up and stared at the phone for a second longer than necessary. That was the first little break in the routine. Not danger exactly, just the feeling that the usual ladder of response had one rung missing. I went back up. The door was open again, same amount, same quiet hallway, same steady light. This time I propped the door fully, checked the closer arm, the hinges, the sweep at the bottom. The closer looked old but functional. I pulled the door, watched it shut, saw it latch, opened it, shut it again. Same result, no obvious fault. I stood there long enough to feel slightly foolish. Storm outside, empty corridor, middle-aged man arguing with a door. Then I noticed the air. Warmer than it should have been in that section by maybe a few degrees. Not enough that anyone walking through during the day would have clocked it, but enough that I did, because I knew that floor. The west corridor always ran a little cooler, bad seal somewhere in the window system. Tenants complained every January. That night it felt strangely even, like the temperature had been disturbed. I checked the stairwell door at the end of the hall. Locked. I checked the suite doors. Locked. I went back to the office with no clean explanation, which bothered me more than if I'd found something broken. Broken, you can fix. Unclear just sits with you. For about 20 minutes, nothing happened. I did a camera sweep, lobby clear, loading dock clear, parking entrance clear. The static hiss from the old desktop speakers made the office feel smaller than usual. I drank the rest of my tea, now only warm, and told myself I'd overfocused on one odd door during a storm. Then one of the motion indicators on the 9th floor blipped, just once. The 9th was the renovation floor, empty suite, plastic sheeting, some box tile, contractor signage taped to the glass. No tenants, no after-hours cleaning, no reason for movement. I pulled that camera feed full screen. Nothing. Plastic over a doorway moved a little, but it could have been airflow. I leaned closer anyway. The feed jumped once with a grainy twitch, and for half a second I thought I saw someone at the far end of the frame. Not a full body, just the suggestion of a shoulder passing behind one of the temporary walls. Then it was gone. Maybe never there. I sat back and listened. Buildings have layers of sound if you stay still long enough. Machinery underneath. Weather outside, the small electrical life of lights and screens. What changed then was a dull impact somewhere above me, followed by another one several seconds later. Footsteps, if I wanted to call them that. But slow. Measured. Heel first. I got up so quickly my chair rolled into the file cabinet. This is the part where people ask why I didn't just leave, and the answer is because leaving an occupied building unsecured during a possible intrusion is not what you're trained to do first. You confirm. You contain if you can. You contact police when the situation crosses that line. The problem is sometimes the line doesn't announce itself. I took the stairwell instead of the elevator. Better acoustics, better control. On 8 I paused and listened. Nothing. On 9 I opened the door slowly enough that the hydraulic closer barely whispered. The renovation floor smelled like drywall dust and cold coffee. Somebody had left one of those contractor radios unplugged on the floor weeks earlier, and every time I saw it I meant to toss it in lost and found. The plastic sheet at the corridor entrance was still moving slightly. I called out, "Security." My voice went farther than I wanted. No answer. I swept the floor in sections, light first, then eyes, the way I'd been taught. Temporary walls, stacked materials, empty offices, dark windows with storm reflected back at me. I found nothing. No person, no forced entry, no sign anyone had been there at all. Partial relief. That was the first one. I even remember thinking, all right, between the storm and the cameras, this place is turning into a machine for making normal things look strange. Then I went back down to the security office and saw the 7th floor door on camera open again. By then it was starting to feel personal, which is irrational. Doors don't target you. Buildings don't pick a night to be clever. But familiarity cuts both ways. When you know a place well enough, every wrong thing feels directed because you're the one who knows it's wrong. I radioed the front desk handset out of habit even though there was no one on it. Dead air answered. I called non-emergency dispatch and explained that I was on site at a closed office building during the storm. No confirmed intruder, but repeated unsecured access behavior on multiple floors and possible unauthorized movement in an empty area. The dispatcher was calm. Said units were tied up on weather calls, but if I observed an actual person or any attempt to breach the office, call back immediately. Reasonable. Useless, but reasonable. I did not go right back up. That was the second partial release. I stayed in the office, watched the cameras, and told myself I had escalated appropriately. If there was somebody inside, they'd show eventually. If there wasn't, I'd ride out the shift, write it up, and maintenance could deal with the damn door in the morning. For a little while, the building cooperated. Nothing moved. The 7th floor door stayed shut. The 9th floor motion indicator stayed dark. Snow battered the lobby glass in bursts, then eased. Then came again. I rinsed tea sweetness off the back of my throat with water from the cooler and started filling out the incident log in neat block letters. Then I heard a footstep directly over me. One. Then another. Not in the ceiling. On the floor above, slow and deliberate, crossing the corridor outside the accounting suite on 10 if I had to place it. I stood still. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Nothing. I took one step toward the office door. 2 footsteps above me. I stopped again. They stopped again. That was when the situation changed in my body before it changed in my paperwork. The muscles in my hands tightened around the flashlight until my knuckles hurt. I had a pulse jumping in my neck. Not panic, worse, in a way. Alertness with nowhere clean to put it. I checked the camera bank. Every feed for the 10th floor had gone to static. Not a single camera. All of them. The rest of the building was still live. Lobby, garage, 7th floor west corridor, loading dock, all normal. But the entire 10th floor panel was gray snow and crawling lines, each monitor hissing softly through the speakers like frying oil. I called out through the office door without opening it. If you're in the building, identify yourself now. Security has been notified and police have been contacted. I don't know why I phrased it that way. Training, maybe. Maybe I wanted to hear how my own voice sounded. It came out steady enough. Something moved outside the office. Not a footstep this time. More like the soft drag of a shoe pivoting on carpet. The security office sat off the lobby corridor with a solid core door and wired glass panel beside it. Good visibility in daytime. At night, with the hall lights dimmed, that glass turned reflective from my side. I killed the office light anyway and leaned just enough to angle past my own reflection. I didn't see a person. I saw the corridor. Empty. Then, a second later, a shape darkened the wired glass so briefly I almost doubted it happened, like someone had crossed close to the panel but stayed low or hugged the wall. I locked the office door. That was the last decision point. After that, I was no longer trying to clear the building. I was trying to stay inside a room with one door until daylight. I called dispatch again and updated them. Confirmed suspicious movement outside the security office, no visual confirmation, camera outage on 10th floor, sole officer on site sheltering in secure room. They told me units were en route when available. That phrase means nothing when you're listening to a hallway. The sounds outside came in pieces over the next few hours. A footstep, then nothing for 10 minutes. A gentle pressure on the office door that didn't quite become a rattle. What might have been somebody stopping just beyond the glass. Once the elevator dinged at the lobby even though I disabled passenger service after midnight, and I nearly called out before I caught myself. Another time there was a knock. Light and polite. 3 taps spaced evenly apart. I didn't respond to any of it. I sat on the floor behind the desk with the flashlight off and the radio in my lap. The office smelled like old paper, dust from the vent, and the faint lemon from my thermos. My tea had gone cold. I kept unscrewing the lid and tightening it again because my hands needed something precise to do. Toward morning, the 10th floor feeds came back on all at once. Empty corridors. Closed doors. No movement. When daylight finally started showing through the lobby glass, it made the whole night feel ridiculous in the worst possible way. Morning has a way of stripping drama off things, leaving only facts and the stubborn parts that won't fit them. I unlocked the office when the first day supervisor arrived and did a full walk with him and the building engineer. Every door was closed. Nothing appeared disturbed. No glass broken. No signs of forced entry. No one asleep in a conference room. No contractors sheltering from the storm on 9. No damage to the records room door. Even the corridor light that had started the whole thing held steady through every test the engineer ran. I filed the report. The supervisor filed his. Management reviewed the access logs. No entries after closing. No badge swipes on the secured floors during the time in question. No stairwell alarms. No elevator calls to 10 after passenger service shut down. And that would almost be comforting if it only explained the building being empty. It doesn't explain the door opening repeatedly on 7 or the motion on 9 or why every camera on 10 went to static together just before I heard footsteps above me that matched my own stopping and starting. I've worked enough nights to know buildings do strange things in bad weather. Pressure moves doors. Electronics fail. Sound travels in ugly ways through concrete and ductwork, but systems leave traces when they fail. People do too. What keeps bothering me is not that I had one bad night in an empty building. It's that the system logs were clean in a place where something or someone moved through multiple secured floors without triggering a single alarm. Which means I still can't tell if that storm exposed a glitch in the building or a pattern that had been there a long time before I noticed it. Story 3. The last one is quieter at first, and that's exactly why it gets under your skin. I was standing in the prep kitchen with a hotel pan still in my hands, staring at the back door because the handle had just moved, and I knew, in that really plain physical way you know some things, that someone was outside. Not because I'd heard footsteps. I hadn't. Not because the dog from the house behind the alley started barking. He hadn't. It was darker than usual out there, that heavy before dawn dark where the window only gives you your own reflection back, and the metal handle had twitched once like somebody had tested it with 2 fingers. I told myself it was wind, then it happened again, softer that time. I set the pan down so carefully you'd think I was trying not to wake somebody, which didn't even make sense because I was alone in the building. My right ear still had one earbud in. Same playlist I always used for opening work. Same songs in the same order. Low enough that I could hear the grill cycle and the coffee brewer start up. I reached up and paused it without looking at my phone. The kitchen went very quiet. A few seconds later, there were 3 knocks on the back door, evenly spaced, not hard, just certain. By the time the voice on the other side said my name, I was already backing away. I worked at a small diner in a town where people got used to seeing the same faces at the same hours. If you came in for breakfast often enough, you'd know who made the coffee too strong, who never remembered extra ketchup, who always forgot to ring in rye instead of white. It wasn't one of those cute old diners from movies, nothing like that. Fluorescent lights, vinyl booths with repaired tiers, a pie case that only looked full on weekends, and a griddle older than me that had 2 hot spots you learned to work around. But it was steady, familiar. The kind of place where routines matter because everybody's morning leans on them a little. I liked opening. That probably sounds strange if you're not a morning person, but I was comfortable alone in that space in a way I wasn't in a lot of other places. Kitchens make sense to me. Sounds mean things. Timers, vents, the clack of utensils in the drawer, the little spit and hiss when the grill reaches temp. There are only so many reasons for a sound, and usually you can name them. I'd been doing the early prep shift for a while by then. I was in my early 30s, lived 10 minutes away, and most mornings I got there while it was still dark outside, let myself in through the back, turned on the coffee, checked the soup from the day before, sliced produce, started bacon. The usual. I always did it in basically the same order. I also always put in one earbud and played the same playlist. Not because I was obsessed with it, it was just easy. Same opening song, same middle stretch when I was on the Onions, same last few tracks when the first server came in and switched the front lights from dim to full. Routine is its own kind of clock. That morning I'd been running a little late, not by much, maybe 10 minutes. I'd had to scrape my windshield longer than usual because the cold had put a thick crust over everything, and then I realized my gas light was on, so I made a fast stop on the way in. Annoying, but not dramatic. The street out front was empty when I parked. The diner sign was off. No glow from the windows, just me, my keyring, and that brittle cold that makes the inside of your nose sting when you breathe. Nothing about unlocking the back door felt off. Nothing about stepping inside felt off either. At first, I hit the lights in the kitchen, and everything came up in pieces: the steel table, the hanging ladles, the whiteboard with the supplier note still clipped to it. I set my bag in the usual spot, tied on my apron, put my phone in the chest pocket, and got moving. Coffee on. Soup checked. Produce pulled from the walk-in, earbud in. Playlist started. The first song was one I'd heard so many times that sometimes I only notice it when it's missing. That's one reason I know I hadn't heard anybody come into the alley. If there had been boots on the gravel, or somebody bumping the dumpster lid, or even a car pulling around back, I would have heard it between songs. I keep the volume low because you have to. Too loud and you'll miss the oven timer or somebody at the front. It's less like listening to music and more like giving your brain a rail to slide along while your hands do the same tasks they've done 100 times. There was one small thing I noticed maybe 5 minutes before the handle moved. I caught myself looking up. No reason. Just that feeling like when somebody walks into a room and you sense it before you hear them. I glanced toward the pass-through to the dining area, then toward the back door, then went back to wiping down the prep counter because nothing was there. If I'd been a more nervous person, maybe that would have been enough. Maybe I would have checked the front lot, checked the alley, called somebody, but I wasn't nervous in the diner. That's the whole problem. I knew that place too well to give much weight to a vague feeling. Then the handle moved. Small. Testing. I remember the exact texture of the pan in my hands when I froze. Cold stainless steel with one dent on the corner from where somebody dropped it last summer. I remember the fryer oil smell that never fully leaves the walls. I remember my left hand suddenly not gripping right, like my fingers had gone stupid. I waited for the wind to hit again so I could tell myself that's what it had been. Instead, I got those 3 knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Not trying to break in, not trying to scare me. More like letting me know there was no point pretending no one was inside. Then the voice came through the door. It said my name the way a regular customer would say it if they caught me taking out trash. Casual, familiar enough to make my stomach drop. "Morning, Nate." The sound was muffled by the door, but clear enough that I knew it was a man. Adult, not elderly, no obvious slur, no panic, no rush. I didn't answer. My throat had tightened so fast it hurt. A second later, the voice said, "You're usually here earlier than this." That was the moment where the whole thing changed shape. Because hearing your name is one thing. Small town diner, name tag, locals who remember you. Fine. But that sentence meant he knew my pattern. Not just that I worked there. Not just that I opened sometimes. He knew I was later than usual on that specific morning. I took one step sideways so I could see the narrow wired window in the top half of the back door without walking straight up to it. My heartbeat had started doing that hard, fluttery thing where it feels too fast and too thin at the same time. The kitchen had gone weirdly bright, every surface reflecting light back at me. I told myself maybe it was a delivery guy joking badly. Except deliveries didn't come that early, and nobody who actually belonged there would stay outside a locked back door talking through it when they knew I was alone. The voice didn't knock again. That's what made it worse. He just waited. I moved closer, quiet as I could, and tried to angle a look through the glass. Outside was the alley, a slice of cinder block wall, the edge of the dumpster enclosure, and darkness flattening everything else. At first I didn't see anyone. Then I saw part of a shoulder, just the shoulder, and a strip of jacket sleeve off to the side of the window, positioned in a way that made no sense unless he knew exactly where I'd stand to look. He wasn't centered in front of the door. He was just out of view. And when I leaned a little closer, he shifted back. Not running, not startled, adjusting, staying out of sight on purpose. I took 3 steps back so fast I hit the prep table behind me. A ladle clattered to the floor and skidded under the sink. The voice on the other side made a small sound, like a breath through the nose, maybe almost a laugh, and said, "It's okay." That is not a reassuring sentence through a locked door before dawn. I pulled my earbud out completely then, and the silence hit me hard. No song to soften it. Just the hum of the refrigeration and the faint rattle of the vent over the grill. I looked around the kitchen like there might be some obvious correct move hanging on a hook. Phone, yes. Keys, yes. Front door route, yes. But the way the building was laid out, to get from the kitchen to the front, you'd have to cross the dining room, pass the front windows, and unlock the main entrance from inside. In daylight with customers, no problem. In the dark with somebody outside who already knew my routine, all I could think was, what if there was more than one person? What if the back door guy was the one I knew about? I crouched and grabbed my keys from my bag. The metal sounded too loud when they hit each other. The voice said, still calm, "Nate, come on. I just need to ask you something." I hate that my first thought was still to make it normal. I actually caught myself thinking maybe he wanted money. Maybe he was stranded. Maybe he knew the owner. Maybe he was just creepy but not dangerous. My brain kept trying to find a version where I could solve it with a sentence through the door. Then he said, "You changed songs already?" That doesn't even make sense unless he had been there long enough to hear the music stop, or had noticed it on other mornings, and either option made my skin go tight across my shoulders. I didn't say anything. I picked up my phone with hands that felt dry and shaky at the same time. I started to call the owner, then stopped. If she didn't answer, I'd lose seconds. I switched to 911 and hovered my thumb without hitting it yet, because I suddenly needed to move first, not explain first. The dining room beyond the pass-through looked wrong in that moment, not because anything was different, but because I knew exactly how it should look. And I couldn't stop imagining someone crouched low behind one of the booths where I couldn't see from the kitchen. That's the horrible thing about a familiar place when it turns on you. Your knowledge fills in the hiding spots faster than fear can. I killed the kitchen lights. Not all of them, just the row closest to the back so I could see the window better if he moved. The shoulder disappeared. I waited. Nothing. I edged to the dining room doorway and looked through the front windows. My car was still out there, alone, a thin crust of frost along the passenger side catching the streetlight. No one visible on the sidewalk. No movement near the entrance. No other vehicles. Could still mean nothing. Could still mean he was alone at the back. Could still mean I was about to walk into the dumbest mistake of my life. Then there was a soft scrape at the back door. Low, like someone dragging a fingernail or a key along the metal near the lock. I moved. I went through the dining room fast, but not full sprint. Because full sprint would have made me loud and stupid, I kept looking at the front windows. Then the glass in the door. Then the booths. Then the reflection behind me. My chest felt tight enough that I couldn't get a full breath. I unlocked the front door with fingers that missed the deadbolt once, yanked it open, and the freezing air came in so hard it almost made me cough. I got outside, locked it behind me out of pure reflex, and hurried to my car. Only when I was in the driver's seat with the doors locked did I finally hit the emergency call. While it rang, I looked at the diner. No one came around from the back. No one appeared in the front window. No one tried the front door. The operator answered, and I gave the address, my name, and probably a very messy version of what was happening. Man outside, back door, knew my name, knew my schedule, possible attempted entry. I'm in my car across the lot now. Stay in the vehicle, she said. Officers are on the way. So I stayed. That was somehow worse than running had been, because now I had time to watch. The diner sat there dark except for the kitchen lights I'd left on, and every second that nothing happened made the whole thing feel less real and more dangerous at the same time. If a guy is trying to force his way in, that's a clean emergency. If a guy stands just out of sight, knows your name, comments on your timing, and then vanishes the moment you choose escape, that's something else. Something patient. After maybe 2 minutes, I saw movement along the side of the building. Just a person cutting across the strip of darkness between the alley and the street. No face, no details. Male build, average height maybe, dark jacket. He didn't run. He walked north with his hands in his pockets like he had every right to be there, turned at the corner, and was gone before the first police cruiser rolled up. They checked around back, checked the alley, checked the diner. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No one nearby matching my description. One officer asked if it could have been somebody messing with me. A friend, a customer, someone from town. I said if it was, that was worse. The owner came down in her house shoes and winter coat thrown over pajamas, furious in that tired, protective way people get when business turns personal. She kept saying nobody should have known I was there alone except the usual staff, but of course that wasn't true, not really. People notice routines. Regulars notice. The man who delivers bread notices. The woman who walks her dog before sunrise notices. The guy sitting in his truck across the street notices. 100 tiny harmless observations right up until one of them isn't harmless anymore. I didn't open that morning. We taped a handwritten sign to the front door saying delayed opening due to equipment issue, which felt ridiculous but also normal. And normal was the only thing anybody in that parking lot seemed to want. I went home after giving my statement and sat at my kitchen table with my coat still on because taking it off felt like committing to the day continuing. I kept replaying the voice. Not dramatic. Not whispering. Not rough. just familiar in a way that told me it belonged near ordinary life, which somehow made it harder to place. If it sounded wild or drunk or openly threatening, I could have filed it away under danger and been done with it. Instead, it sounded like somebody who'd heard me laugh before. Somebody who knew what time the first coffee goes on. Somebody who maybe knew I only wore one earbud because I liked keeping one ear open. I never worked another early shift there by myself. The owner changed the schedule the same week. Front door entry only before sunrise, 2 people minimum for open. Alley light repaired. Camera over the back entrance finally replaced after months of half working. All good changes. All a little late. For a while after that, I'd catch myself pausing my music at random just to listen, even at home. I changed the playlist too, which is stupid, I know. But I couldn't hear that first song without seeing the back door handle move. What bothers me isn't just that a stranger showed up before daylight. It's that he knew enough to use my name casually. Knew enough to mention I was 10 minutes later than usual, and knew exactly where to stand so that when I looked through the window I still couldn't see his face.